this act of creating light is especially meaningful right now. This past year has brought upon us darknesses that no one could adequately prepare for. Through it all, though, we found light in each other, the sense of togetherness, even at a distance. We may not be able to be together in person, but I'm so glad that we can spend this special night together. As we prepare to light candles, may we hang on tightly to the moments of light, the bright moments that this past year brought us.
This year, it brought me light to see the world through my 15-month-old niece's eyes, Stella.
What is bringing me light this year is the continued support of my friends and family.
What brought us light this year is still being able to connect with family and friends through technology.
The thing that brought light to me this year is resiliency.
So a few things that have brought me light this year have been beginning my journey becoming a Jew. So I'm currently in the process of converting, and that has brought me a lot of light.
Bringing a new furry friend home brought us light this year.
Something that's brought us joy in this year has been adding this new addition to our family.
And moving to a new city, Orlando.
Something that has brought me a lot of light this year was moving to Miami and meeting so many amazing people, especially in the Jewish community of Miami, that I connect with and that have made me feel so at home in a new city.
It brought us light to be closer with our children.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat v'yom tov.
We join together in a prayer of gratitude that we have lived to reach this season, the Shehecheyanu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu b'zman hazeh.
Rabbi Deborah J. Robbins talked about how this time, and meaning both this time of COVID and this time of preparing for the high holidays and standing before God, is kind of like doing yoga. In yoga, holding a pose leads to trembling. Breathing and continuing to hold the pose builds strength. I'm reminded, feel no shame. Shaking is an indication of growth, not a sign of weakness. Over time, the shaking lessens and the stillness lengthens. And then it's time to move on to a different pose, a different encounter, and begin the cycle all over. Shaking, I'm like Job, who felt pachad, fear, in his bones. I'm quaking, churning, feeling sometimes noticeable to others, sometimes only to myself. I say, I'm shaking, I'm afraid, or maybe I've been shaken, physically, emotionally, spiritually, by an intense encounter. I breathe. I wait. The shaking stops. The calmness returns. I move again, but I'm changed. This season is about holding the pose. Each day I learn to maintain focus, not to turn away when I tremble or am immobilized with fright or terror. Like yoga, this too takes practice. When I encounter the strength of life, will I tremble in fear? When I'm in the presence of life, will I be able to hold the pose of awe? I know it's hard to necessarily rise when we have certain prayers, so throughout the service I'm going to say we rise spiritually. If you'd like to rise in body, I invite you to do so as well. I invite you to rise spiritually for our call to worship.
Oh
about a time where she needed to experience love.
During quarantine, I've spent all of my time with the person that I love the most, my fiance, Matt. Yet, even in a time when we cannot always be with those we love, I've seen people get more creative than ever to show how much they care for their friends and family. For example, many of my friends have gone above and beyond to show their friends with quarantine birthdays how much they truly are loved and cared for. Some of my close friends, who I originally met at Miami Jews Shabbats, have organized incredible, thoughtful gestures filled with love to celebrate their friends on their birthdays. We do virtual game nights on Zoom through Jackbox and always send the birthday girl her favorite dinner and dessert through Uber Eats. One time, some of the girls picked up takeout, dropped it off at the front desk of the birthday girl's apartment, and then stood on the street with a big happy birthday sign that the girl could see from her window. In addition, my entire extended family now does a Zoom call for every person's birthday, so all of us from across the US can be together, and we all go around and talk about what we love and admire about the person whose birthday it is. I'm sure that my stories are not unique and that everybody has been experiencing incredibly thoughtful gestures for friends and family during this time. I think that more than ever, this last year has truly evolved what it means to love and how love transcends 6 feet and even miles of distance.
everyone. You know, when I consider the concept of something greater than us, I think of one word: justice. And I know that today the word justice evokes a broad range of thoughts and emotions, especially now during these very tumultuous times. But make no mistake, the Jewish people have a long and beautiful history around the pursuit of justice. We dedicate so much tradition to the concept of justice, and there's endless commentary to actively and consistently work towards it. It's written that it's not our responsibility to complete the task of repairing the world, but neither are we free to desist from it. It's our duty to take care of each other and the world around us. You know, one might even argue that this same realization is what called Abraham to Judaism in the first place. It wouldn't be a stretch to argue that justice is one of our founding and most central principles. I'm reminded of B'Tselem Elohim, the concept that we're all created in the image of God. This concept has nothing to do with looks or physical attributes. As a matter of fact, debating what God looks like is missing the point completely. Rather, we have within us the broad range of emotional capacity that we see from God in our Torah. And so we as human beings must consistently choose to reflect the best parts of our humanity outwardly to the world around us. So, showing God's love requires action on our part. Justice does not need to be a provocative word. Most of us are probably familiar with the analogy of shepherds tending to their flock. If a shepherd ignores their sheep, they'll encounter danger. Maintaining the herd requires action. Something that I find particularly interesting in this analogy is that the shepherd's staff is also known as the rod of correction. That's what justice is at the end of the day. Standing up for a herd, or communities, or people. All human beings who are created in the image of God. Justice is not an act of charity. It's not doing someone a favor. It's the necessary correction of something unjust, the prevention of harm to our friends and neighbors. So when I think about the purest display of showing God's love, I think of one word: justice.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai?
despair numbs our souls, give us hope. When we stumble and fall, lift us up. When doubt assails us, give us trust. When nothing seems sure, give us faith. When ideas fade, renew our vision. When we lose our way, be our guide, that we may find serenity in your presence and purpose in doing your will. There's a powerful exercise that you can do where you stop and you write your own obituary. I know it's super morbid, right? But it helps us to ask ourselves, what is it exactly that we want to be remembered for? We spend so much of our time working on what David Brooks calls our resume virtues. You know, our grades, our job experience, how much money we're making. But how much time do we spend on our obituary values? Those things that really matter in life. If we're kind, truthful, honest, courageous, patient. That's what the high holidays are all about. Pushing us to examine ourselves and think, if this was really the last day of my life, what would I be remembered for? And living into that. So we ask God now to remember us for life and blessing, and I invite you to think about what you would like to be remembered for and how you can live into that in this new year. face of them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Let me not crave in anxious fear to be saved, but for the hope and patience to win my freedom. I invite you to take a moment now for silent prayer. Wow, what a year. Wildfires are raging throughout the West. There's utter destruction in Louisiana, explosions in Beirut, a pandemic, a rise of white nationalism, white supremacy, hate and division. Millions are unemployed and millions are sick. We normally associate Rosh Hashanah with apples dipped in honey and this joyous new year. Miami Jews usually has apple martinis, and we sit close to each other, singing in harmony. This year has been disappointing for many of us. Yet, on the high holidays, traditionally, the rabbi would give a sermon of rebuke, give a bean-pounding, scolding, scare the people into improving their lives. So I wonder, when so many are struggling with our health, when we're suffering economic loss, when so many are living in fear, wouldn't it be nicer to have a little something heartwarming? So I turned to one of my rabbis, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. When asked this question, he answered, when we're in crisis, people react in three possible ways. Either they deny the problem, they blame the whole world, or they look at themselves and consider, what is it that I can do? The last is the Jewish way. So, talk about rebuke, about tochacha. Explain it so people understand it's kind and not judgmental. That it does encompass both judgment and mercy, which in a crisis can help rather than hinder. So I know that this is a time where we all just want to hear that we are loved, and you are, and that we're here for one another no matter what, and we are. So why rebuke? Because if you really love someone, if you really think that they deserve a good life, the most you can get out of them, if you really respect someone, then you rebuke them when they fail. Rabbi Yossi Bar Hanina taught, love unaccompanied by tochacha, love unaccompanied by rebuke, is not real love. Right now, our world is full of rebuke, full of people calling one another out, and it can feel anything but loving. It reminds me of my freshman year of high school, so allow me to reminisce for a moment. Freshman year was my first year at my district high school, and not my inner city multicultural arts magnet. I started at this new school only knowing a handful of kids out of the 1,600. I started by hanging out with those kids that I knew from my neighborhood, mostly jocks in the popular crowd. But then I heard one telling a racist joke, and the others laughing uproariously. And I self-righteously told them that I will not hang out with you anymore, and explained to them how bigoted and terrible they were. So I tried another clique, and another, always leaving because I was too pure. Someone said something homophobic, or anti-Semitic, or racist. Everyone said something that was sexist. I eventually ended up with a group of kids who were on the total fringe. The popular kids called them the Dirts. They were punk rockers, ravers, skaters, goth. and queens, just folks who didn't fit in. They were at once super accepting of oddness and difference, while also being incredibly judgmental of everyone, including ourselves. Now, they said offensive things just like everyone else, but the difference was that when one of them said something offensive, it would be called out by the other members of the group. There's a beauty to being called out by a friend and then staying in relationship with them. It gives you a chance to mess up and then grow. I learned from the Dirts to stop being so moralistically pure and to give other people the opportunity to rethink and grow when they say something that just sets off my alarms. We live in a hard time to know exactly what the right thing to say is and the right thing to do. A time where it's incredibly easy to unintentionally belittle or offend, and where it's also really easy to call out other people when they belittle and offend. It's a hard time to voice opinions in a way that others will hear on the one hand, while at the same time, we know that saying nothing is unconscionable. We live in a time of silence and avoidance on the one hand and cancel culture on the other. I often get flack for being too vocal and for not being vocal enough. I know rabbis who have been fired for their views of Israel, fired for posts about Trump. I'm defensive of my colleagues as we're supposed to have freedom of the pulpit, meaning we are supposed to be able to express our views without fear of repercussion. But some get fired, and all statements have consequences. It does make me wonder about people who I judge from afar, like Amy Cooper, the woman who told a bird watcher that she was going to call the police on him and say a black man was threatening her. Or Daniel Maples, a guy made famous by yelling, "Back up, I feel threatened," at an old woman who asked him to put on a mask at Costco. Both of whom lost their jobs and are now famous for these ugly moments. I will admit, it's hard to have compassion for the Amy's and the Daniels. I'm outraged by these people, and yet I see that they are just people. Do they deserve to be corrected? It would be a sin not to. Do they deserve to be rebuked? 100%. Do they deserve to be vilified, trolled, and fired? I'm not so sure. I'm really struggling with this. I'm still in many ways that same self-righteous girl I was freshman year of high school, who was quick to correct and paint others as bigots. But I'm trying to live into what I've learned. And I think, and I may be wrong, but I think it's a helpful lesson for us all in this country right now to ask ourselves how to leave that place of marching off and being so self-righteous that we end up friendless, and enter a place where everyone can be vocal, sometimes be wrong and be corrected, and grow. In October, President Obama addressed young leaders saying,
I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or used the wrong verb, or then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself because, man, you see how woke I was? I called you out. Let me get on TV, watch my show, watch Grownish. You know, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far.
That's easy to do. I'm quoting Obama because I think he has a point. Two, really. One is that we shouldn't judge people entirely
based on one moment in time, which reminds me of a nightmare that I had once where I was standing before the throne of judgment and God, and I was found wanting because I was being completely judged only on my actions in 7th grade. We know better than that. We want people to grow and learn how to do better. We know that just as every cell in our body replaces itself, and therefore we're truly a completely different person every 7 years, that we hopefully grow and think differently than we did 7 years ago, and will continue to grow. And I like his other point, that armchair social justice just isn't enough. It's not enough to point the finger at others. It's not enough to just post. We need to do the real work of educating, advocating, and acting. But I also disagree with him in the idea that our call-out culture doesn't create real change. It does. I love the power that we have as a group, even through social media, to come together and to make change. I love that we can change the way offensive terms are used. I love that we can take people who had previously been protected by their status and their money and their power and call them to task and bring them to the court of justice, at least in the court of public opinion. I love that we can use our power to protect others from people who have victimized us, even though they somehow got away with it. I love that we can drown out and call out bigotry. I am all about calling out negative behaviors and words. And I'm all about canceling racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and other forms of hate. But there's a difference between canceling these things, which are often built into the structures of society, and canceling a person. A difference between addressing a problem and a person, and a difference between rejecting a person and rebuking them. In Judaism, rebuke is not a weapon. It's an art form. In Midrash Sikra, 3 rabbis weigh in on the art of rebuke. They thought that they'd lost the ability to rebuke in their time, so I wonder what they would think about us today. The first is Rabbi Tarfon, who said, "I swear by the holy service of the temple that there's no one in this generation who may rebuke." So what does he mean when he says there's no one who may rebuke? He means don't be a hypocrite, pointing the finger and accusing someone else of sins that we ourselves commit. Often, when we find fault in others, it's because it's a fault that we recognize in ourselves. Tarfon is saying, before you rebuke, check yourself. The second is Elazar ben Azariah, who said, "I swear by the holy service of the temple that there's no one in this generation who can accept rebuke." Elazar ben Azariah relates to the one on the receiving end. The listener must be willing to listen, improve, and do better. The rabbis go so far as to say that when someone rebukes us, we should be genuinely happy for the chance to fix the problems that are keeping us from reaching our full potential. Genuinely happy. This reminds me of a story Rabbi Barris shared about his high school tennis coach, who was so critical of him that he finally said to his coach, "You think I'm worthless?" And the coach said, "If I didn't think you could do better, I would stop giving you advice. Once I stop talking to you, that's when you know I think you can't do any better. That's when I think you don't have any more potential to grow." So, we should rebuke in the same way, in a way that the giver believes in us, that we believe that they have the potential to grow. The third is from Rabbi Akiva, who said, "I swear by the holy service of the temple that there's no one in this generation who knows how to give a rebuke." So this is what I've been struggling with. Good thing we have 2,000-year-old wisdom to draw on. Rabbi Akiva emphasizes the way in which rebuke is delivered. He teaches that one must learn how to give rebuke without insulting, without exacerbating tensions, and without causing resentment or denial, so that the words will be received
by their intended audience, and therefore they will bring about desired change. This makes me think back to my friends from freshman year. How I heard among them homophobic things, and yet it was in the same group that I met my first trans friend and saw boys kissing in person for the first time. That it was in this group that I heard Holocaust jokes told. Yet when I told them about my story, my grandparents' survival, and how Holocaust jokes can never be funny, members of the group came with me to high holiday services and listened to me chant Torah in front of the congregation. To this day, I hold my friends who make me better as precious commodities. Those who tell me when I just gave a terrible sermon, those who believe that if I say something offensive that I'm probably unaware, who try and inform me when I don't have the story quite right. So in this new year, I guess my message is to speak truth, point out bigotry, and work to cancel hate, not people, and to remember that rebuke is not and should never be easy. I listened to Rabbi Akiva, who taught that pointing out someone's shortcomings or error should not be a chance for insults or a sense of superiority. It should not become an opportunity to humiliate or gloat, or as President Obama said, post and then go see what's on Netflix. Instead, rebuke, if properly intended and given, should be an act of affirmation and of love. An affirmation that the person is worth the effort in the first place, and faith that he or she remains capable of improvement. Offered with love and a sense of humility, a rebuke is a gift and a challenge to do better. Without our friends, colleagues, and families being willing to point out our own errors in judgment or action, we would remain blind to our own faults and those aspects of reality that we don't want to see. Each of us depends on the caring of others, their courage to articulate disappointment as guides towards self-improvement and refinement. In this new year, let's learn to lovingly rebuke others, and more importantly, receive rebuke. We need those people in our lives who will be real with us, and when they are real with us, we need to listen. Shalom Tova Mitzvah. Happy and sweet.
Tell me something, girl. Are you happy in this modern world? Do you need more? Is there something else you're searching for? I'm falling. In all the times I find myself longing for change. In the bad times I fear myself. Tell me something, boy. I
We all see the numbers every day. Millions sick, millions without work, and I think billions spiritually hungry and lonely. I invite you at home to say the names of those for whom you are praying for healing. capture the awkwardness of this juxtaposition. There's a concept of God where God knows us and loves us and is intimately part of our lives while still having a little bit of authority like a parent. We call this immanence. And then we have a concept of God where God is removed from us as having a set of rules, being the ultimate authority, being out of reach, and feared and admired by us. We call this transcendence. When we say these two names together, Avinu Malkeinu, we express a paradox. That God is always both. Immanent, but transcendent. Immanent, but out of reach. Transcendent, but loving, with a divine love. It captures a piece of our yearning for closeness, for confirmation of our relationship and love.
Yeah.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, we come before you in our brokenness. Avinu Malkeinu, Ein Lanu Melech Ela Atah. Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are our sovereign. Avinu Malkeinu, Aseh Imanu Lema'an Shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, arouse within us new vitality to make this a good year. Avinu Malkeinu, Shalach Refuah Shlema L'cholei Amecha. Avinu Malkeinu, bring healing and wholeness to the ill among us. Avinu Malkeinu, Kara Roa Gezar Dinenu. Avinu Malkeinu, allay the harshness of the decree against us. Avinu Malkeinu, Zohreinu, B'zichron Tov Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, remember our goodness and call it to mind. Avinu Malkeinu, Aseh Lema'anecha V'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake and save us. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Ma'anenu Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. Aseh Manu Tzedakah V'chesed V'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu V'Ameinu, Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim.
I remember once hosting a Shabbat service for my students at my old job at Tulane Hillel, and we had such a huge turnout that we ran out of prayer books. When we got to the mourner's Kaddish, I watched as the entire room of close to 100 people stood up and without any text in front of them, recited this long Aramaic prayer from memory. It was objectively fascinating to me. It's not an easy prayer, and there's no melody to sing along to. And yet we all knew every word, and I felt bonded to them by this moment of reciting it together. It moved me deeply, and it stays with me when I think of the power of Jewish community and the things that are universal to us as Jewish people. This summer, I was given another reminder of the power of Jewish community, but one that was a result of a punch to the gut. On May 3rd, my father died after a long and cruel battle with primary progressive aphasia and dementia. He had suffered a stroke at the age of 56, and his decline occurred slowly and gradually over the next 12 years and rapidly over the last few. In some ways, I feel like I've been grieving my father since 2008, because the reality is that he was never the same after the stroke. When the dementia set in, I struggled with the feeling that while I didn't want to lose him, I also did not want him to live this way. He was existing, he was not living. I started to feel numb to the situation, like a coping mechanism for the darkness that I felt. People would ask, how's your father doing? And I'd fight the urge to crassly say, well, he still has dementia, so not great. Dementia is a cruel disease that takes and takes and takes, and when we knew his death was imminent, a part of me thought that perhaps I'd been through the worst of the grief already, that nothing could feel as terrible as the seemingly endless open wound. What I've come to understand is that nothing can prepare you for the death of a parent. I would find myself sometimes doubled over in pain and heartache, angry that so much was taken from him. His speech, his mobility, his independence, his dignity, and even his ability to have more than 10 people present at his very strange Zoom funeral. I was one of those 10 people, and at this funeral I said Kaddish for the first time as a mourner, by the traditional Jewish definition. As these words came out of my mouth, I felt like my legs were going to buckle beneath me. I held my sister's hand, and under my mask said this long, difficult Aramaic prayer that had moved me so deeply that day at Hillel, and now took on a new meaning. It solidified that this was all real, this was all happening, and it wrecked me. But it also began the process of healing. Shiva, the 7 days of mourning immediately after a death, is designed to help us cope with our loss, to face it head on as we allow ourselves to You show up and show up and show up to grieve and grieve and grieve, and as you show up and show up and show up, it gives people an easy way to show up for you. And they did. And actually, a Zoom Shiva takes all the small talk out of the Shiva experience, and as weird as it was, at least at the time, early in quarantine, now it's increasingly less weird, it meant that everyone present on the Zoom listened to everyone else share memories of my father in better times. And then we said Kaddish together. In the days and weeks that followed, I was overwhelmed with messages and meals and donations from my community. With each day of Shiva, I felt the burden start to slowly ease. I started to find peace in the structure. When you're in that space of intense grief, you just want someone to tell you what to do, and the rabbis of old told me exactly what to do. Turns out they really thought this stuff through. It slowly became easier to get through a day without crying. That is until I said Kaddish. Now 4 months later, I still find it hard to get through Kaddish without breaking down completely. But I see that as a gift. I spoke to so many friends who've lost a parent, who were so generous with their reassuring words. And they all told me that you never really get over it, you just learn to cope. And I don't really want to get over it. They also told me that the further I get from his passing, the less I will remember what he was like when he was sick. That the memories that really stay with you are the happy ones. When he was vibrant and silly, when he was driving me to dance class and recording my theater performances and sitting me on his lap to listen to classical music together when he got home from work, and helping me with my biology homework and taking me to college orientation, playing board games with me, giving me a full history of the Beatles, and taking us on vacation to obscure national monuments, and pulling pranks on me, and watching all the Oscar-nominated films together, and just being his weird, wonderful self. When I say Kaddish, those images come flooding back, and it hurts. But it hurts so good. It reminds me that he's gone, and it reminds me that he's still with me. And it reminds me that my community is here with me too. Try to get through this. Yikadal v'yikadash shmei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrach v'yoteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayachon v'yomachon v'chayed v'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman karev v'yimru amen. Yehi shmo v'mei Rabbah m'varach v'olam v'lamei amaya, v'yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yikramam v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei v'kusha b'richu. Ve'elam yinkol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, ta'miram v'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlom Rabbah min Shemayim, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom yivramah, u'yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
May the source of peace send peace and comfort to all who are in mourning. As a closing benediction, I wanted to give you a little Hebrew lesson. So the Hebrew word for a crisis is a mashper, which is definitely what we're in right now, which is what it can feel like when we lose a parent, which is really what we're experiencing internally and externally. But the Hebrew word mashper is also the word for a birthing stool. There's a breaking that happens, and a bit of destruction that has to happen for something new to be born into the world and something new to be created. So as we go through these high holidays and you hear Hayom Harat Olam, which means today the world is pregnant, I hope that you take all of your crises and use them as birthing stools. We can make something great, and make an even better future than was our past.
Listen as your day unfolds, challenge what the future holds. Try and keep your head up.
Hava Mitzvah, a happy and a sweet new year.